The story begins with Yigoo, an unemployed young man who was good at only one thing: controlling the mechanical claw. He could get any prize from any machine, but in real life, his incredible talent wasn't very useful to him. That's why, tired of the routine, he took a break and decided to quit his job. The very next day, some new neighbors were going to move into the apartment downstairs. At night, while he was coming home, he saw his new neighbor. Seeing her act so delicately, he was captivated. It was love at first sight, but since he'd never felt this way, he was unsure what to do. His best friend suggests taking advantage of being neighbors to get closer to her. After having a few drinks, he returns to his apartment, but the elevator takes him one floor lower. There, he runs into his neighbor, who seemed like a completely different person. She wouldn't stop screaming and acting crazy. Yigoo tries to defend himself. That's why he headbutted her. The next day, he goes to the bakery where the girl works, and there he finds out her name is Seonji. When he sees her again, he gets really scared because he thought she would be angry about the hit he gave her. That's why he grabs his bread and runs out. Then she goes after him and gives him a welcome gift. He accepts it and is very confused because she was once again the sweet and delicate girl he liked so much. In the early morning, he sees her outside, so he uses the milk as an excuse to try to talk to her. But when he goes down, she was no longer there. She had gone out to the street to fight with a man. Yigoo thinks he's a pervert taking advantage of her, but actually the man was her father. Yigoo apologizes and explains everything that happened. The man asks him if he had met his daughter before. He says no, but Seonji recognizes him from the elevator. That's why she starts attacking him. Because of this, the man asks him to forget everything that happened and to act as if they didn't know each other. He agrees because he didn't understand anything that was going on. The next day, he runs into Seonji, but she acts completely different. Yigoo doesn't understand what's going on because during the day, she's a sweet and kind girl, but at night, she's crazy. Intrigued, he decides to follow her at night, this time spying on her without her noticing. Here we see that the Lord wasn't referring to her as his daughter, but was speaking to her in a more formal way. After a few hours, the girl falls completely asleep. So her father tries to carry the house on his back. But the man was already old and suffers a terrible cramp. Luckily, Yigoo was nearby and manages to carry her before she falls. The next day, the man was in the hospital and would be there for several days. So he tells Yigoo that for spying on them, he will give him a punishment and hand over his daughter to him. For that, he asks for all his documents. Here we find out that Yigoo had a degree in sports, and that's why he had practiced many of them. Therefore, he was more than qualified to take care of Seonji. Yigoo. He doesn't understand why he has to do it, so the man explains everything that's happening to him. He tells him that his daughter doesn't have a split personality, but that she's possessed by a demon. Every day, at 2 in the morning, the demon takes control of his daughter's body and goes out for a walk for at least 2 hours. Yigoo obviously doesn't believe him, but when he remembers what he experienced, he realizes that's the only explanation. He tells him that it's a family curse passed down from generation to generation. That's why they have to watch over her during the night. Also, his daughter doesn't know anything about what's happening, because when she wakes up, she doesn't remember anything at all. His mission will be to make sure she doesn't run away or harm his daughter's body. Yigoo accepts the mission, but when night falls, the demon claimed to be very powerful, and also he was someone who could see inside people. That's why after one night, he wants
renunciar, pero el Señor le dice
to stay strong and hold on until she recovers. Also, he will hire him at his bakery so he won't be unemployed. The next day, he tells her that even though Xiaojie doesn't remember anything about the demon, he does. He remembers absolutely everything she does during the day. That's why at night, he makes fun of Yigoo. He thinks it's all a bad joke, but the demon tells him that's not the case. What he's experiencing is real. Then she confesses that she likes him. He obviously doesn't believe her because the Lord warns him and could use that kind of trick. At that moment, she remembers she has to do her mischief. So she goes to the store and buys all the vanilla chiffon cakes. She bought them all because there was a girl who only ate those and she didn't want to leave her any. Also, to annoy her even more, she threw away the ones she wasn't going to eat. Then, when she calms down, Yigoo asks her why she's in Xiaoji's body. She tells him that in the past his great-grandmother attacked her, and that's why she cursed his family. Yigoo thinks it's nonsense and she starts destroying everything so that he'll believe her, and also so that he'll obey her without questioning anything. The next day, Yigoo can't get used to Xiaoji's 2 personalities. During the day, she was too silly. Yigoo, what nonsense! He asks, "Why a silly body?" "Nonsense, Yigoo." She asks about her body. "What nonsense?" Seonji does everything she says. Since then, they started spending more time together, and with each passing day, they got along a little better. But Yigoo felt bad for Seonji, and she asks her cousin, why haven't they tried to exorcise the demon? She tells her that they did try, but not even once did it work. She also tells her that the demon is like a teenager who loves gambling. When night falls, she decides to bet on the claw machine. If he wins, the demon has to tell him how to get her out of his body. The demon agrees because he thought he wouldn't make it. Just like that, Yigoo's great talent is finally useful to him in real life. After losing, the demon tells him that he has to say his name 3 times and order him to leave Seonji's body. That way, she would be free. But now the most important thing was missing. He needed to know the demon's name. The next day, they go to deliver an order. At that moment, Yigoo bumps into a very strange guy who notices something odd about Seonji. But Yigoo apologizes to him and tells him to go on his way. Then we find out that Seonji had very different tastes from the demon. For example, she liked choco mint flavor, a flavor. At night, we see a man trying to jump into the Han River. The police ask him to think it over, but suddenly Seonji comes running and tells him to just jump already, not to dwell on it since doing so would only make him suffer more, thank goodness. Yigoo arrives to try to control her, but she gets upset and, as punishment, jumps into the river. Yigoo doesn't hesitate and jumps in after her to save her, but he didn't know how to swim. In the end, the firefighters end up saving him, and he asks them to save her too. But it turns out that Seonji was an excellent swimmer. She managed to cross the river, swimming butterfly style. Seeing this, the man decides not to jump and to keep fighting for his life. The next day, Seonji appears in the news because she had crossed the river. They swam, and because of that, her father was upset, but they had to pretend so their daughter wouldn't worry. Then, her cousin tells her that Seonji's dream is to go to France to study pastry. But because of the demon, they had been postponing it. When night falls, Yigoo wants to talk to the demon, but this time he doesn't come out. Seonji comes out instead. It turns out she couldn't sleep, so they go out for a walk to clear her mind. She tells him she can't sleep because that day is the anniversary of her mother's death. After walking, Yigoo wants to go back home, but Seonji tells him to keep walking a little longer. That's how they end up at the cinema and watch a romantic movie. Yigoo is feeling very nervous and she takes his hand, but when he tries to hold her, it turns out it was the demon. All this time, she pretended to be Seonji to test his feelings and realized that he was truly in love with her. That's why she proposes something. He must put all his heart into making her happy, and that way, he will reduce the demon. The house remained because Yigoo was nervous that day. Though he tried, he couldn't do it, so she stayed. But since Yigoo was so anxious, he eventually left. To begin with, she tells him that she wants to go to the sea. But since she couldn't go out, he had to take the real Seonji. When they arrive at the beach, she starts to cry, although the one who was really crying was the demon. Then, Seonji offers her a chiffon cake. Yigoo has to take the choco mint because he knows the demon doesn't like that flavor. At night, the demon was looking for a vessel in the trash. Yigoo asks her if she liked the trip. She says yes, and that's why she'll reduce his possession by 5 minutes. Yigoo tells her it's not fair and threatens to hurt the body if she keeps acting like that. Then he starts running and arrives at an alley where there was a sacred rope that he couldn't cross. Luckily, Yigoo arrives to help her. He apologizes to her and promises to try harder to make her happy. That's how days later he takes her to the trampoline. And there the demon remembers her childhood with Seonji's parents. Then, the two of them start jumping and playing all the games at the place. Days later, he takes her to the botanical park since the demon really liked flowers. There, he picks many flowers for her. She is truly beautiful. The demon says that her current body isn't bad, but her true form is 100 times more beautiful. The next day, everyone is very happy because Yigoo made the demon happy and thus reduced the possession by 30 minutes. Upon discovering this, Seonji's cousin promises to make her happy for a longer time, in order to reduce the possession even further. That's why they take her out to party, but a strange man stops her. Did he want to take her? Yigoo arrives, introduces himself as her boyfriend, and tells the man he can't just take her away. The next day, Seonji is surprised to see that her cousin gets along very well with Yigoo's best friend. That's why she wishes she could be more like her, since Seonji finds it very difficult to express her true feelings. Suddenly, the man who tried to take her away shows up. He tells her that he is a shaman, that he is willing to remove the demon from Seonji, and that he will do it without charging them much money. Yigoo had
hecho una promesa al demonio, por eso rechaza.
Later on, he asks Seonji to call him when she arrives at the stop so he can go meet her. Then he tells his father what had happened. He tells her that it's not the first time this has happened to him, that several charlatans have approached him offering the same thing. But it turns out this shaman was not a charlatan. The man kidnaps Seonji and takes her to his temple to exorcise the demon. It turns out that during the new moon, the demon was weaker, and that's why it was the perfect time to exorcise her. Upon learning this, he goes to look for her. When he arrives, we see that the shaman really did have powers, but he gets there just before they can exorcise her. The shaman says not to interfere, that everything will be over quickly, since it wasn't a high-ranking demon, just a simple ghost. Even so, Yigoo decides to save her, so he grabs a bamboo stick and finally, one of the sports he had practiced comes in handy. This way, he manages to defeat the shaman and hits him with the stick until he knocks him out on the way home. He asks her if everything the shaman said is true, and she answers yes. Here they reveal to us that the ghost was a young woman who grew up in a very poor village. She lived during one of the country's worst times. Her parents died when she was very young due to a terrible pandemic. Because of how terrible the situation was, some shamans arrived who promised to eliminate the bad luck of the village. They offered a sacrifice, and since she was an orphan, they captured her and sacrificed her. But a family took pity on her and buried her remains in an urn. If she stayed there for 100 years, all the resentment and pain in her soul would disappear, and she could move on to the afterlife. But Seonji's great-grandmother opened the jar and threw out her remains. That's why, with all the resentment in her soul, she cursed her and her entire family. She also confesses that she acted in such a miserable way because she was very angry and scared. She knew she was weak and didn't want to be exorcised, so she pretended to be a high-ranking demon. That way, they would treat her well and obey her without question. She also tells Yigoo that his wish will soon come true since she is about to disappear. She had been out of the jar for almost 100 years, and that means her soul will simply cease to exist. Yigoo asks her if there's any way to prevent that. The ghost answers that there is, that she must be locked in her jar again and wait 50 years to be purified. But her jar no longer existed, so she tells him there's no way anymore. The next night he wants to talk to the ghost, but she doesn't come out anymore. Apparently she had resigned herself to disappearing and didn't want to bother anyone, so he decides to do something about it. Seonji's father tells him that the house where the curse began is still standing. That's why he travels to the village and starts digging all over the yard. But no matter how much he searched, the jar was nowhere to be found when he was about to give up. A bird lands on a rock as if telling him that what he's been searching for is right there. After a lot of effort, he manages to move it, and when he digs, the jar is there. After cleaning it, he runs tirelessly to the city. At the same time, the ghost was getting everything ready to disappear. She no longer had to pretend to be bad. So she leaves the last chiffon cake for the girl who always came to buy them. Also, for the first time, she is kind to the cashier at the store. Then she tells the man that he was a good father and that he did a great job. Before leaving, she wanted to say goodbye to Yigoo, but nobody knew anything about him those days. Although suddenly he comes running without giving any explanations and takes the ghost to the park that he likes so much. She doesn't understand what's happening, but Yigoo explains to her what he's been doing these past few days. He tells her that he doesn't want her soul to disappear. He wants her to go to a better place. He promises her that if she enters the jar, he'll care for it for life. The ghost was moved and can't help but cry, so she decides to trust him and tells him her real name. She says that he was not a demon, just a girl who had very bad luck while she was alive. Before entering the jar, she hugs Yigoo and thanks him for being a good person. Then, Moonjan leaves Seonji's body. The next night, Seonji doesn't wake up anymore. That is, the demon was gone. Or at least that's what her family believed. The only one who knew the truth was Yigoo. Then, Seonji finally takes the trip to France she always wanted, and her family is finally free. The man no longer had to take care of his daughter and could now do the things he had postponed for a long time. And Yigoo finally found his calling. Although it wasn't what he had studied, it was something he really liked. Years later, we see that Seonji returns to the country. Here we find out that she was also in love with Yigoo. But, as she had said, she wasn't very good at expressing her emotions. The time she held his hand at the movies, it wasn't Moonjan, it was her. In the end, we see that Seonji calls Goo, meaning they lived happily ever after. Also, we see that he kept his word and had Moonjan's vase very well protected. That's how this story ends. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the movie. I love the movie because it has a happy ending. Thank you very much for watching the video until the end. If you like this summary, don't forget to give me a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. See you in the next story.